You don't know who Gary Coleman is.
I do too. He's not Webster.
He was the shit when he was on TV.
Okay.
And I found out that even the name Twilight was sort of a long time coming. Like she didn't originally call the book Twilight. Do you know what it was called originally?
I feel like I look so old compared to Bella, but I'm also looking to her for answers. It was called Goldeneye.
It was called Forks.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, that's got a weird eating connotation, doesn't it?
That is lame as fuck. Okay, another note that I have, I'm not that good at learning things by myself. And especially like if it just comes to me in one medium, like if someone's like, here, read these instructions and figure it out. I have to see it, do it, hear it, see other people do it with other people, and then it really like comes to light. So as I was listening to these podcasts, all of a sudden I started realizing different things about Twilight. First of all, Bella's 17 years old. They talked a little bit more about the teenage angst, so I kind of was like a bit more sympathetic. But the big takeaway, Tom, was that did we even notice that Charlie is Bella's dad and Carlisle is Edward's dad? And don't you think these are the same name in different languages?
I never thought about that.
I mean, they're derived from the same name.
Yeah.
So then right before we got on, I started thinking I wanted to write down all the names, and because Edward's family's names are pretty weird. They're all over the map.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see like the what do you call the origin of names?
Yeah.
What am I trying to say?
I think that's what you mean.
Okay. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Like where the actual name word of the name came from.
Right. Like Esme, Alice, Rosalie. Does Esme have any?
Alice, Edward, Emmett.
Yeah.
So a lot of alliteration on vowels for those names.
Yes.
Whereas we have Charlie, Bella, Renee, all starting with sort of hard consonants, right?
Yes.
I'm just brainstorming.
And then all the names we had today, it was super overwhelming.
So many people in this chapter.
It was a bit much. I'm still getting over editing last times when you took a turn for the worst and went full blown Stephanie Hard-on. And I feel like I'm not even talking to a critic anymore. I'm talking to a groupie.
You said just a few minutes ago that you're becoming more sympathetic to Bella, so I don't want to hear anything about it.
Just said that because I know where you are.
I think in the course of the last episode, I moved through that.
Okay.
I wrote out a summary for this chapter. Do we want to review the previous chapter?
I think that we should definitely tell where we're coming from. So yeah.
Do you want to do that, since I'm gonna give a quick overview of this chapter before we dive into it?
Okay, well let me just refresh my memory. Yes.
Last one was blood types, bloodbath.
In this chapter, this is where Edward all of a sudden is not sitting with his family, calls Bella over to the table. He's all of a sudden very charismatic. He wants her to sit with him. Then he says he's skipping school and he won't be there the next day. The blood type thing is because she goes to her biology class and they're testing their blood types. She has a bad fear or disgust about blood. So she ends up going to the nurse. And then towards the end of the chapter, he decides that he needs to drive her home because she's too sick and she can't go to gym because she's so fucking clumsy. And so he forces her into his car, reams her out the whole way home. So the chapter ends, he was smiling as he drove away after he dropped her off.
So then this chapter begins in the very next moment. As I sat in my room trying to concentrate on the third act of Macbeth, I was really listening for my truck. I would have thought, even over the pounding rain, I could have heard the engines roar, but when I went to peek out the curtain, again, it was suddenly there.
Okay.
And then she just turns the page on that, like, how did this loud truck instantly show up and she didn't know about it? In the previous chapter, Edward warns Bella, look, when you go to the beach, just be careful not to fall in or get hurt because I think you attract danger. And then nothing like that happens at the beach. So she does these setups and then there's no payoff for them. Is there a point?
Well, I'll tell you what it did for me. It made me remember when you said, I think she already would have hurt her truck when Charlie put the chains on. And so now Stephanie Meyer's telling us, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. She confirmed my criticism.
Exactly. There was some, I know, in the previous chapter, that's also where Edward says to Bella, what if I'm the bad guy? Yeah, I don't even know why she has a truck, to be honest. She could just as well have a moped.
I mean, I guess it's no pun intended, I guess it's a vehicle for introducing her relationship to the Jacob Black and his dad.
Okay, so she could almost get hit in the parking lot without it damaging the truck.
Right.
Stephanie Meyer was like, how can I almost kill her but make sure she doesn't get squashed entirely?
Well, and Nikki, it's this incredibly potent image that I'm still waiting for it to be resolved.
You mentioned Billy and Jacob as far as the truck. So in this chapter, that you may be going to give us a summary, I'm not sure.
I will.
Because I had my mind stuck in the movie, I was confused when Jacob and Bella meet, and then it's like they're meeting for the first time. Because I'm like, because in the movie, Jacob comes with his dad to deliver the truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then Billy's spinning around in the wheelchair. Charlie's cracking handicap jokes.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of difference. I think this chapter, you had texted me that a similar thought that I had about myself, but didn't share with you. I think that what's going on, because this chapter seems kind of readable.
It was like a page turner.
What happened to me?
Yeah, am I getting dumber? Is the book getting better?
Yeah, its programming has infiltrated my CPU.
Okay, you want to do your summary then?
I do. This is a brief summary of this chapter, Scary Stories.
Okay.
So this is Bella's trip to First Beach at the La Push Indian Reservation, which I believe is south of Forks, with Mike's group.
It's a little bit west. Okay. I checked. It is in fact 15 miles away.
And I had to go back and straighten out the whole, what the hell is La Push?
You forgot?
Well, I never really had a clear idea about it. And I went back a lot reading this chapter to pick up continuity with earlier chapters. Because
now that you're saying that, I am wondering, because she calls it First Beach, but La Push, what's that?
And then later on, the kids go to the village. And I'm like, what's the village?
Oh, fuck.
And so I looked back to that very scene where she gets the truck from Charlie, and she mentions, talking to us, narrating, that it's the La Push Indian Reservation.
Oh, that's the reservation name.
So the reservation is La Push. I assume that's also the village name, but then First Beach is on the reservation.
Okay.
So
okay.
That's how I think I worked it out in my head. So
okay.
Bella goes, it's her trip to First Beach at the La Push Indian Reservation with Mike's group. There is continued awkwardness in the Mike, Jessica, Bella triangle. Some Quileute Indians join the group on the beach. One of them mentions authoritatively that the Cullens do not come to La Push. Bella meets Jacob Black, a 15-year-old Quileute Indian, whose sisters Bella has played with as a little girl when she lived in Forks with her family. Bella leads Jacob on flirtatiously in order to learn from him the mystery of why the Cullens don't come and mix with the Quileutes. And she learns the tribe's legend that the Cullens are the cold ones, or vampires in your language, who don't feed on humans as other vampires do and have a treaty with the tribe. And then everybody drives home.
You really gave it all to us, Tom.
I tried.
You're really good at summarizing.
Thank you.
So shall we delve in? This was sort of a shortest chapter.
Yes, my response to the chapter was that it is mishmashy, but a fairly readable chapter with a nice paragraph describing the beach.
I too thought she did a really nice job on the scene. This is her wheelhouse.
Pleasurable reading almost.
You had said that you had a theory on why this was easier to read.
So I think when she's writing this friendship with Jacob, and they're just being, kids having, talking with each other and all that. Like you say, I think that's in her wheelhouse. She relates to that. She can write what she knows. But when she's trying to write this mysterious, dark, foreboding, it's a mess.
I think that is a very on point theory.
We went to the beach, and then there was this setting, and we went over here to this setting. This is what we saw, and this is what we did. And it's like actual storytelling.
Yeah. I noticed when she was describing the scenery, there was a ton of alliteration, not necessarily like ongoing, but like she would use 2 or 3 words with W's, 2 or 3 with D's, stuff like this. And it just seemed to flow a lot easier.
Which leads to another general crit I have of this thing, which is that I think she really tends to bury her dialogue in, what are you calling these things? Dialogue tags?
Yes.
So I went and read back that chapter just to read the dialogue as if it were a screenplay.
Yeah.
Like her line, his line, her line. And it took a lot of concentration to pick out the dialogue, because she would have a line of dialogue, close quotes, and then a whole bunch of description and sentences and narration.
And by that time, you've totally lost track of what started this conversation. Shall we begin on page 110?
Yes, it's the non sequitur show.
So we already talked about the first paragraph where she's sitting in her room, supposedly studying Macbeth. She starts the second paragraph with one of my least favorite types of sentences. I wasn't looking forward to Friday. It more than lived up to my non-expectations. Totally nonsensical. And then she says something that is a bit perplexing. So she says, of course there were fainting comments. Jessica especially seemed to get a kick out of that story. So now we're thinking there's a story going around. Luckily, Mike had kept his mouth shut and no one seemed to know about Edward's involvement. So I'm asking, how does anyone know if Mike didn't say anything? Or what is he keeping his mouth shut about?
I was confused by this too, and reread it and reread it. I think he's keeping his mouth shut about the fact that Edward swooped in and took Bella away and took her to the nurse's office.
It feels like it's contradicting itself.
I agree. And she also has another one of these bad modifier sentences where she says there were fainting comments. So the comments were fainting?
Thank you.
Comments about my fainting spell.
Yes, did she even faint? I thought she was just laying her head down.
You're right, she didn't even faint.
I also got caught, and I said to myself, this is my fault. I'm being a lazy reader because I just assumed that as soon as she's with her buds, they're at lunch. So then we start out, she's talking to the pals. Jessica said, so what did Edward Cullen want? Oh, I don't know. I never really got to the point. And then she says, you look kind of mad, which I think is a Mean Girls comment. But then it goes on and on. She says the worst part about Friday was that even though I knew he wasn't going to be there, I still hoped. So then I'm like, wait a minute, is it Friday yet? Because it was just Thursday night. Then she says, when I walked into the cafeteria with Jessica and Mike, that's when I said to myself, I already anticipated they were in the cafeteria, but I have to be honest, she didn't say they were there. I don't know. It just felt a little herky-jerky.
It says at the bottom of 110, what did Edward Cullen want yesterday? Jessica asked in trig.
Sometimes I miss the last line of a page.
It's those dialogue tags.
Is this her idea of setting the scene in trig? I have a couple more things on this page. The very next paragraph after they enter into the cafeteria, at my usual table, everyone was full of our plans for the next day. And I just thought it was weird because it felt like the first time she was actually including herself.
She does that later. Remember when she's playing Jacob, pumping him for information, and she's pretending to flirt with him, and she says she intentionally groups herself in with the kids. Oh, and she's asking about what that older boy say? That's Sam. He seems like he's too old to hang out with us kids.
Was he named Sam?
Isn't that Sam?
Tom. I don't know. I'm just being impressed right now.
You're right, though. She does seem to include herself in the group. Our plans, not their stupid plans for my miserable Saturday.
and my usual table.
Yeah, right.
Like she's actually belonging to this school and this table.
I noted on this page that this is the first chapter that Edward is not present.
Oh, entirely. That's true.
He's not personally in this chapter at all. Yeah. And the other thing I had on this chapter is, what do you think about this Lauren character?
Fuck Lauren.
The corn silk hair.
I could do without Lauren. Yeah, is she supposed to be like an opposite to Bella? And also, why does she have silver blonde hair? Okay, so I have silver blonde hair. But she seems like a total bitch. But she seems like a high school girl. It just seems like a lot of names that we shouldn't have to remember.
I counted them up when they were all at the party, when they were all at the beach. Do you know how many there were?
21.
22. I wrote down all the names. Do you want to hear them?
Yes, please.
And it might actually be 23.
Okay.
This is unclear. There's Mike, Tyler, Eric, Ben, Connor, Jessica, Angela, Lauren, 3 other girls, Lee and Samantha and Bella. And then somebody says that Lee brought 2 other girls. So I don't know if one of those girls is Samantha or not.
I can't think of any book I've ever read that has that many characters.
22 characters in one little scene.
Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs is a close second.
That's 8.
I knew it was a lot, but I totally just guessed. 21 off the cuff. That's too many.
Yeah, you guessed an outrageous number and it wasn't enough.
Are we going to hear about these people ever again?
Yeah, that's part of Stephanie's thing is introducing these characters and giving us a little information about them so we take note of them, but not having them do anything. Who were Ben and Connor?
I have a comment about Ben too. Page 113, middle of the page. I was fairly sure their names were Ben and Connor. All right. Then we move to page 115. Eric and the boy I thought was named Ben. So she doesn't even know their names. Bella, if you don't know, I don't care. I mean, I would be better if she would say, the boy with the cleft lip. At least I'd have an image. So Tom, in all the research you've been doing on Stephanie Meyer, have you learned what her major was? What was she actually studying?
Yes, she got a degree. Let me
open your Stephanie file. When you open the file, a little animation of hearts comes floating on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. I've got it on my other page.
Brigham Young.
She went to Brigham Young University with a degree in English literature.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and bring in the C.S. Lewis thing just because there's no way to easily work it in. I was thinking about this book, Twilight. I was asking myself rather, is it a novel or is it just a book that somebody wrote? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not sure.
Are we talking about novels and films or are we just talking about books and movies? Anyway, that's kind of a snooty elitist thing.
So I could see where you would say this is a book and not a novel because, yeah, it has pages, chapters, words on paper, but does it follow the structure of a traditional novel?
Exactly right, Nick. Coincidentally happened to be reading this C.S. Lewis book of essays, and he's writing this one about good work. Okay, so C.S. Lewis is talking about the difference between, he talks about art a lot. And so he says, until quite recently, I think this is probably the 1950s that he's writing,
okay.
Until quite recently, until the latter part of the last century, which would have been the 19th century, it was taken for granted that the business of the artist was to delight and instruct his public. There were, of course, different publics. The street songs and the oratorios were not addressed to the same audience, though I think a good many people liked both. And an artist might lead his public on to appreciate finer things than they had wanted at first. If the artist is going to educate, to entertain and instruct, he needs to make sense and he needs to be entertaining.
Yes.
Even though he can do more than that. Yeah, at the very least, he has to be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to say, skipping over, many modern novels, poems, and pictures which we are browbeaten into appreciating are not good work because they are not work at all. They are mere puddles of spilled sensibility or reflection. And I instantly thought of Twilight. It's an interesting question. What's the status of art? I mean, it doesn't even have to be in the stupid, sociopathic media art. It can be Like, what's the standing of art when this becomes the New York Times bestseller? The next question I had was whether she intended this to be a young audience's book. I think we had touched upon that earlier before. Like,
Huh.
did she just write this as a novel, or did she write this as a YA novel? And I found some information about that.
Okay. Because I
Um,
think when you make the pitch, you have to specify, don't you?
I think so. So it says here that when Stephanie Meyer first pitched Twilight to publishers, she called it a, quote, suspense, horror, romance comedy, unquote.
What?
She left out science fiction and what else? Anyway, she later stated in an interview that romance is the most important aspect of her novel, but it's just not that romancy. It's hard to nail down, but romance tends to be my favorite part of any book or movie because that's really the strongest emotion. Little Brown and Company published it in their young adult fiction collection, but this is what Stephanie Myers had to say about that. I didn't write these books specifically for the young adult audience. I wrote them for me. I don't know why they span the ages so well, but I find it comforting that a lot of 30-somethings with kids, like myself, respond to them as well. So I know it's not just that I'm a 15-year-old on the inside. So she didn't write it as a young adult novel. It just got marketed that way. My theory is that it got marketed that way because the publisher saw how simplistic and primitive.
But Tom, that's basically saying I'm an idiot.
You or Stephanie?
Stephanie, I didn't intend to write this book for 14-year-olds, but that's just what appeals to me because I'm emotionally retarded.
I think it makes it seem like maybe it's more of a vanity project than anything else. You know how people will write something just for themselves, even though it may be this incredible little concerto or something like that. Anyway,
I'm not familiar with vanity project.
I can't explain it very well because I don't have a firm grasp on the term, but
like a suicide note. That makes me really like even more disappointed in people that publish books. I feel like if I was a dumb person, maybe I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
Did you ever seen Fern Gully?
I don't think so, but I remember it.
It's a Disney animated film. I saw it when I was like 8 years old. But anyway, all the characters live in the rainforest, and then like a bunch of guys come and they're gonna cut down the trees for a shopping mall or something, and you just want to go to Fern Gully and get away from the dummies.
You mean Avatar?
That's funny you say that because one time I caught like the second half of a conversation and someone was describing was it called Avatar, those blue people? Yeah, they were describing Avatar, and I said, "Are you talking about Fern Gully?" I've never seen that movie, but I should see it.
Avatar?
I've never seen it.
Oh, it's the Twilight of movies. Oh,
I feel like it came out either when I was in Spain or when I got back, so I was very poor.
It's so stupid.
It is?
We should watch it. It's so bad, so heavy-handed, and so long.
Oh, it is?
And really, really dumb.
I have so many things that I want to do for our show, including traveling to Forks, Washington. We may have to go to Italy eventually if we continue with this shit rag. Watch Twilight. Yeah. Now maybe watch Avatar. I feel like I'm ready to go back to this. I really like the C.S. Lewis thing though.
We were bitching about Lauren, the corn silk hair.
Lauren is Mean Girls.
Yep, she's a mean girl. So the that first paragraph about the truck, that's on Thursday. That's the conclusion of the day of the last chapter.
Right.
And then there's Friday where she's getting all the fainting comments. And then where we haven't gotten to yet is when she gets home on page 112 that night, she has dinner with Charlie.
We don't even know why Lauren dislikes her so much. It just comes out of nowhere.
Right. Later when they're at the beach, Lauren makes some snarky comments about the Cullens.
Yeah, maybe she's jealous. Maybe she actually likes Edward.
That's what I think it is. Like, how come
the new girl's getting attention?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's just another thing where it just comes at you out of nowhere, no explanation, no follow through. I mean, it would be nice if it come to a climax. Maybe they could get in a fight by the fire and someone would fall in. There is a couple things about Mike in this chapter. He's still On the top of 112, he's being territorial. I tell you what, Tom, I didn't like on the page of 112, the top of 112, where Bella sort of responds to Lauren being a brat. And then she says all this nasty stuff. I never noticed what an unpleasant nasal voice she had.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's so catty. That first sentence after the little space there, don't like it. That night at dinner, Charlie seemed enthusiastic about my trip to La Push in the morning. That night at dinner, ... in the morning. Do I have a short attention span? Yes, I do. Don't introduce two fucking different times in one sentence.
Yeah, don't and start the sentence on one day and end the sentence on the next day.
I mean, she totally could have just left out in the morning and we'd know. I just don't like being jerked around, Stephanie Meyer.
I hear you. Don't like being jerked around, Stephanie Meyer. Although, this is the first place where there's a time compression and there's that blank space in between paragraphs to let us know that.
Oh, yeah, because later in the same page, there's not.
That's right. Totally rando editing. Yeah, because that's the next day. Now it's Saturday. And the whole rest of the chapter is this Saturday trip.
Okay, so when it says that, I meant to sleep in, but an unusual brightness woke me. I totally thought it was going to be Edward's glowing skin there. But then we find out it's the sun.
I thought it was kind of weird and childish, this description of the sun that she has. I hurried to the window to check, and sure enough, there was the sun. It was in the wrong place in the sky, too low, and it didn't seem to be as close as it should be, but it was definitely the sun.
I asked myself if there was any meaning to the boys' vehicles, the Suburban and the Sentra.
What is her fascination with the name brands? The Volvo, the Sentra, the Suburban, the Tylenol. Come on.
That's right. You're supposed to say gelatin and tissues, not Jello and Kleenex, fuckhead.
Right, because later he says, it's either mine or what's his name's mom's minivan, not
Right.
Dodge Caravan.
Right, exactly. How about a Ford Econoline with no windows? No, I was just wondering if she was like trying to make some sort of statement about like who they are or money or something, because Suburban is pretty expensive. But also, we know that Tyler just crashed his parents' car. And
You're right. Good call. I forgot about that. Yeah, Tyler, what was he driving? He was driving the Econoline, right?
he was driving a van.
The Honda Odyssey. Did they have smartphones in 2005? Since I still don't have one, I don't know when they came around.
Well, I was a little late to the game with the smartphone, but I didn't get a smartphone until 2009. Okay, well, anyway, I remember when I got that phone because I had been seeing the other kids in the workshop with their iPhones.
From school that I was at?
Yeah, you and me, we were in a translation workshop. Remember, I can't believe how much of our lives together you don't remember. It's actually quite alarming.
I don't have an explanation for it. Yeah, now I'm thinking about how much of my life I don't remember. Oh, thank God. It's okay.
Tom, I wanted to ask you, now that we're on page 114,
Yes.
how many times in your life have you used the word glowering? Because Stephanie Meyer uses it twice in 18 pages.
I didn't even notice that.
I'm sorry, I need to back up even further. He smiled blissfully. It was so easy to make Mike happy. And then in the next paragraph, it says, it wasn't as simple to make Mike and Jessica happy at the same time. And when I read this, it was so easy to make Mike happy, I thought, this is what Stephanie Meyer thinks of her husband.
Well, and she did say if she were writing her own story, it would be the Bella meets Mike Newton story.
Would it really be Bella or would it be Jessica?
Jessica and Mike.
He is not Bella. Stephanie is not Bella.
I think you're right. I don't think she is.
She maybe had some darkness inside of herself that she could never let out because she was a Jessica.
Maybe. I think
and
she
a Mormon
may be
Jessica.
We're at the good paragraph.
Yes. So this is where I Googled La Push and Forks because until this point, I actually wasn't sure if Forks was even a real place. And I was pleased to find that it is. disappointed to find that it's 3.5 hours from the nearest airport, so we'd have to fly into Seattle and get a rental car to get there. But it looks so pretty.
So was this really a beautifully written passage, or is it just by comparison it's beautifully written?
I think it's definitely by comparison, because I got another new book this week and I read the first paragraph and I was so enchanted. It was like, I think that it's definitely in comparison. I think it would be nice to read some of this for our show.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start on the bottom of 114 and then I'll read this big paragraph. Is that what you were thinking, or where do you think the beauty is?
Go, paint me a picture.
Okay, close your eyes. I've been to, sorry, I'm a bad reader. I've been to the beaches around La Push many times during my Fork summers with Charlie, so the mile-long crescent of First Beach was familiar to me. It was still breathtaking. The water was dark gray, even in the sunlight, white-capped and heaving to the gray rocky shore. Islands rose out of the steel harbor waters with sheer cliff sides, reaching to uneven summits and crowned with austere soaring firs. The beach had only a thin border of actual sand at the water's edge, after which it grew into millions of large, smooth stones that looked uniformly gray from a distance, but close up were every shade a stone could be: terracotta, sea green, lavender, blue-gray, dull gold. The tide line was strewn with huge driftwood trees, bleached bone white in the salt waves, some piled together against the edge of the forest fringe, some lying solitary just out of reach of the waves. Tom, I get a lot out of this.
I do too. I think I appreciate the fact that it's a setting. I can totally picture what's going to happen here. And that is such a help to me as a reader.
Totally. But this is a complete picture.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think so.
Dare we say? Oh, I thought so. I was in it.
The best writing so far is what I wrote down. And then, of course, it becomes instantly confusing again.
In the driftwood paragraph, she says, so Mike's leading us the way to a ring of driftwood logs that had obviously been used for parties like ours before.
Ooh.
But their party is just sandwiches and an array of soda. I don't think the previous parties were those kind.
Well, she didn't find any needles or anything in the ground, so it's okay.
I'm not talking about needles. I'm just saying like some beer.
Oh, okay.
Harmless beer.
I'm sorry. I was having my own thought.
Okay, Tom, carry on.
We can't even get, like, we're going to have to do a two-parter on the most readable chapter.
We haven't even got to the fucking point of this chapter.
Jacob's not even here yet. She's still got to go look at the anemones and the tidal pools. She's talking about the tide pools. They'd fascinated me since I was a child. I don't believe that. They were the only things that I ever looked forward to. And on the other hand, I'd also fallen into them a lot.
Of course.
It's more this comedy. I think it's misplaced because it just seems like a bit of slapstick in the middle of a description of something. Because all you can do is picture falling into stuff all the time.
When I picture a teenage girl falling, it's not a laugh out loud moment. If it was an old, like, actually not even, I don't even know who would be funny. Someone, maybe like The Rock, someone who you expect to be strong and have some wherewithal about stepping, but you don't laugh at a teenage girl.
Right.
I can't believe you actually included comedy in the genre.
That's what she said. Yeah, romance comedy.
I know.
Rom-com.
It is okay. I'll take your word for it.
That's not my words.
I'm talking to Stephanie. Actually, this part about the tide pools teeming with life, that's when I was like, I've got to find out more about this place because I would love to see this.
It reminds me of this place I went to in Belize called the Blue Hole, something like that. There's one or two of them on the planet. It's a sort of a big round thing where there's a bunch of water just in the middle of the jungle, but the water is incredibly clear and incredibly blue, and you take a bus out there and you go swimming in it.
Oh.
Okay, so in the next paragraph, she talks about the others were fearless and leaping over the rocks, perching precariously on the edges, but she just said that they were shallow. So why is it precarious if they're perched on the edge of these shallow pools? I didn't understand.
Have you ever walked across some rocks that water's flowing?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you kind of got to be careful.
Isn't perched, doesn't that mean you're sitting?
Yeah, I imagine if squatted.
Okay, I think I'm just being nitpicky, but it bothers me to describe them as shallow and then talk about how dangerous it is to fall into them.
Oh, okay. No, that's a good point.
And then, but I get, this is another paragraph that I liked.
I did too.
I wrote good right next to it.
Okay, and this is where Mike hands out the sandwiches and sodas. And then we see Jacob.
The boy who noticed.
Oh, finally. In the second paragraph on this page, Bella says, so she says Angela is a restful person. I thought that was a weird way to describe a person. But anyway, she left me free to think undisturbed while we ate. And I was thinking about how disjointedly time seemed to flow in Forks, passing in a blur at times with single images standing out more clearly than others. And then at other times, every second was significant, etched in my mind. I knew exactly what caused the difference, and it disturbed me. But I highlighted this whole section because I thought, this is what I'm experiencing reading this book.
Yeah. Disjointedness of time, that sometimes it just drags on forever.
And also, by now we're on page 118. So I know that when she says, I knew exactly what caused the difference, I know she's talking about Edward, but still, why can't you say it?
So Stephanie's, for some reason, she's reluctant to give us the matter at hand. She won't tell us what Bella's thinking about Edward. She's
feel
clearly
like
picturing Edward in her mind, thinking about Edward. But she won't even say his name here. I don't think she says his name in the whole chapter. Why is she so reluctant to do that?
I don't know. And I feel like she's trying to create a mystery, but it's not working. It's instead of a mystery, it's like I'm getting anxiety.
Yeah, I find it laborious.
Laborious. I feel like I have to put the pieces together for her.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I want to read it. And then there's another nice little paragraph, half of the nice little paragraph.
Well, it's getting cloudy now.
Yeah.
It's getting a little cloudy, so it's ominous.
And then the paragraph falls apart. That's where Mike and Jessica headed up to the one shop in the village, which we have never seen or heard of before.
Right.
But she talks about it as if we had. To the shop in the village, you know? I don't know.
Larson's.
What's the name of the village?
And also, is it like a bait shop or is it a gift shop?
Right. She didn't talk about it when they drove in.
She sure did not.
I have to Google Earth your damn novel.
No, that's what I've been doing.
Did he get anything at the shop? Does he come back and bring anything back from the shop, or is this another one of those unfulfilled promises?
I think she just put it in there because they already went for a hike. So if she said they went for a walk, I don't know.
The next time we see Mike, it's on 127.
Oh, shit.
This is when she's faking out Jacob, and she says, our heads snapped up at the same time to see Mike and Jessica about 50 yards away walking toward us.
Jessica.
So what did they do at the shop?
They were making out.
Maybe they were using the toilets.
Ew, maybe. Maybe.
I mean, sometimes right after you eat, you got to go. Just when Bella is thinking of Edward, that's when Jacob shows up in the story.
She's thinking of Edward?
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So Jacob comes over and sits by her.
In a confusingly worded clause.
Where?
Jacob, a few minutes after Angela left the hikers, Jacob sauntered over to take her place by my side. But Jacob's a boy. He would take his place by my side.
He looked 14, maybe 15, and had long, glossy black hair. You know what, Taylor Lautner? I wish you would have had long, black, glossy hair instead of that frizzy mop, that wig mop that you were wearing.
That shitty wig. one of the guys at work brought him up in a conversation with one of the other guys at work, and I went, because they were talking about something, and the one guy mentioned him like he was like a good actor, like you talk about some actual actor.
I want to just read a sentence to you. I think is going to make you feel good.
Have you got a Werther's I can suck on for a while?
Yeah, you old grandpa. I was sitting alone on my driftwood log with Lauren and Tyler occupying themselves by the CD player.
Really paints a picture.
I want to talk about 1,000 more things right now.
Are we talking about this book anymore?
Okay, let's finish the book. We got to finish this because you got to go to bed. Okay, I can barely even hold my interest. All right, I'll tell you what I'm interested in.
It's going to be a problem, isn't it?
Page 119, his
Chapter
skin
6.
was beautiful. Again, Tom, when you're 16 years old, when I'm 16 years old, I'm not looking at someone's skin. She says, however, my positive opinion of his looks was damaged by the first words out of his mouth. So I said, oh, I wonder what horrible thing he said. Well, you're Isabella Swan, aren't you? What's so bad about that? She just knows his name. He just knows her name. It was like the first day of school all over again. All right, so then...
Is the problem that he calls her Isabella instead of Bella?
I think the problem is she's so fucked up about being acknowledged or recognized. She just wants to disappear. Then he tells her who he is. Oh, yeah, you used to go fishing with my sisters. Well, then she tells us something she should have told us, I believe, in the prologue. Of course, I'd kicked up enough tantrums to end the fishing trips by the time I was 11. Remember in chapter 1, she tells us she has a knack for forgetting painful experiences, and she refers to fishing, but we don't know why it's so painful. Right. I was like, is she getting molested on the fishing boat? What's happening?
No, this is the skill of Stephanie Meyer coming to the fore, where she plants a little seed early on, and now it's finally coming to fruition. And you, Nikki, are proof of that, because your skill in literary detective work, you can paint those connections and tie up those chords.
I feel like in a workshop, someone would say, I don't want to be a detective. I don't want to work for this.
I thought up above that, however, my positive opinion of his good looks was damaged by the first words out of his mouth. Sounds like a sentence in somebody's trot of a translation.
So right. Totally.
Go back and write that in English, please. And he says, then I'm the youngest of the family, and I realized both Jacob and Edward are the youngest of the family.
Has Edward told us yet about his family, how they all got together? Because Edward is the youngest, but he is actually in...
He's posing as the youngest.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Right, yeah, right. He's really, really old.
And Carlisle is like, Carlisle is supposed to be like 30, and we're supposed to think he's really old and fathering 5 children. Sorry. Sorry, I'll edit that out. Okay, that's interesting to note because I didn't realize Jacob and Edward were the youngest. I also think it's like so funny that she's 17 and he's 15 and she's like, ooh, younger man.
Yeah, a major thing that I was keeping in mind as I was reading this was how much younger Jacob is in the book than he is in the movie.
Oh.
It's a much different dynamic because in the movie, as I recall it, it doesn't seem like there's a big difference.
Right.
Between their ages.
But Tom,
between 15 and 17 is huge.
But do you remember in the first movie, he's just normal Taylor Lautner, but then in the second movie, remember that's when he like got all bulked up and he was always taking his shirt off and it was a big thing?
Yeah, but I don't think he looked like a 15-year-old kid in that movie.
No, No.
at all. 15-year-old kids are little scrawny things.
Yeah, the way they're in the way they're describing it here, yeah, exactly. You would think he's like a little couple inches shorter and
Like, I remember when I was 15 taking driver's ed, and I know what I look like, and it wasn't, like it wasn't like Taylor Lautner looked in that movie.
yeah. And then Jacob's sisters are twins and they're 18 and they're already married.
Okay. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, down at the bottom of the page.
Where I commented hard eye roll.
Where?
You wouldn't happen to know where I could get my hands on a master cylinder for an 86 Volkswagen Rabbit. Ha ha.
What I underlined was the pleasant husky voice.
Oh.
And I heard it in my head. You wouldn't know where I could get my hands.
I thought it was funny that Bella said, as if I knew what that was. That's the one time I saw any comedy.
Why wouldn't she say that out loud?
She's so full of secrets and bullshit because
I can relate.
But Tom, what I really hated about this is that we have not even gotten to the juiciest part. This is horrible. Okay, I need to fast forward a little bit because so she's talking to Jacob, she's pretending to understand what he's saying, and then on page 122, we get to this groundbreaking revelation or something where she is telling us that she's gonna use her moves on him, even though all we've been talking about for 3 weeks is how oblivious she is to any other boys, any flirting, period. But all of a sudden, she's like, oh, I hoped young Jacob was as yet inexperienced around girls, so he wouldn't see through my sure to be pitiful attempts at flirting. And then what does she do? She copies Edward. I trying to imitate the way Edward had of looking up from underneath his eyelashes. So obviously she knows how flirting, because she knows when Edward does it to her, but she acts like a fucking buffoon, totally oblivious.
Right. Yeah, it's all over the place, isn't it?
Yes.
There was one point where she kind of addressed that, and it stood out to me. On the previous page,
Okay.
very top, he flashed a brilliant smile, looking at me appreciatively in a way I was learning to recognize.
Oh.
Does that mean she's beginning to, sort of grok when boys are looking at her with the way that the movers were looking at you?
I actually took that to be like a little bit reflective of all of this, all the boys' attention she's been getting at the high school. Like now she's seen 1, 2, 3 guys come on to her.
Right.
And so I just thought it was that. But now that you're saying it, it kind of feels like a greater awareness. So Lauren sees Bella and Jacob sitting next to each other, immediately wants to destroy any chances Bella may have with him, and then says, oh, maybe Edward's gonna come. And then the older guy says, do you mean Dr. Carlisle Cullen's family? And then Bella says, he was really closer to a man than a boy. His voice was very deep. Then this bitch Lauren says, yes, do you know them? She asked condescendingly. And then that's when the old man, the 19-year-old, says the Cullens don't come here. He says that in a tone that closed the subject.
Yes. And then the next sentence, Tyler, trying to win back her attention, asked Lauren's opinion on a CD he held.
What do you think about Mbop?
When Lauren first starts insinuating herself in there, she's talking to James. She says, how nice. She didn't sound like she thought it was nice at all, and her pale, fishy eyes narrowed.
What? I didn't even see this. Oh my God.
Corn silk hair and fishy eyes.
That means like far out, right?
I think so. I think it means sort of far apart and bulging.
Oh, fuck. Fucking Lauren I'm not getting a nice picture of her at all.
And Plus, you can distract her with a CD.
Well, if she's fish-eyed, you could distract her over here while she's also looking over here.
Yeah, she's always going, what was that? What was that? Again with the deep-voiced boy.
Okay.
But I said, this is good. She's moving the story along.
Yes, as we've said, this is more readable. It has more momentum.
For some reason, she won't give us dialogue. She'll just report it. He'd said that the Cullens didn't come here, but his tone had employed something more, that they weren't allowed. They were prohibited.
She had to say, she couldn't just say that they were prohibited. She had to also say that they weren't allowed, because the readers may not know that word, prohibited. It's on their vocabulary list. It gets colder and the sea is darkening, and Bella shoves her hands in her pockets, and then to flatter Jacob says, so you're what, 16? And then Jacob, he confessed, flattered, I just turned 15. Bella says, really? I would have thought you were much older. I'm tall for my age, he says. He's just introducing, he just says like, oh, that's Sam. He's 19. He's a man. And then now Bella's trying to juice him for information about the Cullens.
I tried to make my smile alluring, wondering if I was laying it on too thick. He smiled back, though, looking allured. Success.
Okay, bad. His voice was even huskier than before. Okay, say his line and then I'm going to say hers.
Where are we at?
The bottom of 123, right after he looked allured.
Oh, yeah. Do you like scary stories?
I love them!
Do you know any of our old stories?
Well, that's a whole paragraph later, Tom. Let me catch up here. Not really.
He perched. They, I didn't, what'd you think about the whole legend, the way it was described here? Again, totally different than the movie where she discovers it up in the bookstore. Remember when she goes up to buy prom dresses with what's their names?
But doesn't Jacob also tell her?
I don't remember that. I remember her sort of piecing it together by looking at pictures, and
she does a lot of Googling.
Yeah.
She does Googling and she finds the bookstore.
You're right. She Googles first. That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I felt like it was I liked the story. I thought it was humorous that they call them the cold ones. It's supposed to be a secret. And he just blabs it right out to Bella the minute he meets her. Okay, so I have to say what he tells her. Okay, he tells her his great-grandfather met a family that they called the cold ones. And then they made an agreement that those people would not come on their land, even though they don't hunt people. And then Bella says, so how does that fit with the Cullens? Are they like the cold ones your grandfather met? And then Jacob says, no, they are the same ones. In the great-grandfather's time, they knew of the leader, Carlisle. And then that's when Jacob divulges that the cold ones are actually blood drinkers, but the pale faces know them as vampires. And then Jacob just laughs it off. He's like, Edward, I'm going to do what I want and let the pieces land where they may. Jacob says, I guess I just violated the treaty. Whoops. He also does say that when Dr. Cullens started working at the hospital, the people from the tribe quit going there.
That's very good. I think, going back,
Of course,
we have another example of Stephanie Meyer having a character say something and then having the other character ask the wrong question about what they just said.
Where?
At the bottom of 124. So she's talking about the cold ones.
Okay.
Okay, your great-grandfather, he was a tribal elder like my father. You see, the cold ones are the natural enemies of the wolf. Well, not the wolf, but the wolves that turn into men, like ancestors. You'd call them werewolves. And she goes, werewolves have enemies? What she should say is, your ancestors were werewolves? Right.
Exactly.
Jacob was just telling me some stories. It was really interesting.
Oh, you're so interesting, Mike.
Right before that. So Mike and Jess are still about 50 yards away.
Yes.
I was tremendously grateful to Jacob, eager to make him as happy as possible. I winked at him, carefully turning away from Mike to do so. Do you have to carefully turn away from somebody who's 50 yards away from you so they don't see you winking?
No.
Thank you.
And I also thought when it gets to the bottom and he's like, where have you been? I'm like, why is he asking that? He was just waving at her. I thought he was happy to see her.
Yeah, right. Wait a sec. Mike asked where. Mike's the one who went away.
Exactly.
Where have you been? Where the fuck have you been? I've been here.
Then he says he's going to come and see her the next time they're in town.
And she lays it on thick about that. No, she says she's going to come see him.
She does? Oh, okay. Next time Charlie comes, I'll come too.
I promised.
That'd be cool.
They got into the Suburban. I don't understand the placement of people in the seats here. Does a Suburban, I would have to have 3, right? The front seat, the middle seat, and the back seat?
I think maybe it does. Maybe we'll have to look into that. Maybe we'll rent one when we go to Forks.
I don't fucking know.
I'm too tired to fucking think out Stephanie Meyer's map of the inside of a Suburban.
That you can't figure out. There are 22 characters. Throwing red herrings all over this chapter. Oh, the truck's quiet now. So
Okay.
the next chapter is titled
Nightmare.
It'll have a dream in about 1 page, and then the rest it'll be totally unrelated stuff.
Well, I did notice that we have noted that Edward is often walking away or leaving her at the end of chapters, and also what's her name? Bella is going to bed and waking up all the time. It's like Stephanie Meyer can't come to a stopping point without someone exiting or passing out.
I thought that in the movie, the Jacob character was almost wholly unsympathetic because he was this kid who couldn't get the fucking message. And this chapter of the book clears all that up because Bella totally started the whole thing.
Yeah.
By stringing this dumbass 15-year-old along.
I think even though I don't want to read all the Twilights, I don't want to read all the books on here, I do want to read the one from Edward's point of view because I just think that sounds interesting. So Midnight Sun.
I probably will read all of them, but not on this show.
Okay. I mean, feel free to do whatever you want and bring us more input. Fuck. Life and Death? Did you see this?
Life and Death. To know, oh God, what is it? Another?
You know Bella and Edward now get to know Bo and Edith. A complete reimagining of the classic novel. Is there a classic novel called Life and Death, or is she talking about a reimagining of her own novel and calling it a classic?
She means I'm recycling the story and renaming the characters and playing with some of the settings. Yeah, I think they call that a cash grab.
Okay, Tom, I'm gonna go. What?
All right, thanks for talking.
Okay, Tom, I had a great time.
Me too.
Later, dude.